without further ado, I want to introduce Kevin Phillips. He's one of our Dun.js core team members.
Hopefully everyone can see my slides.
Yes, you're good to go.
Cool. So like Jason said, I'm Kevin. For the past year or so, I've been working on building the CanJS DevTools Chrome extension. So I'm going to talk about all the stuff that I've learned. I have about 50 slides and 10 minutes to present them in. So that's like 12 seconds a slide, but feel free to interrupt me if you have questions. All right, so what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about what Chrome extensions can do, what all the cool stuff you can do with them. I'm going to go through some details about all the different scripts that are involved in building Chrome extensions, and then I'll walk through building a sample extension to see how it all works. All right, Chrome extensions, what can they do? They allow you to extend the Chrome browser in a bunch of different interesting ways. You can read these, or we'll just look at some images. So the first thing you can do, obviously, I mentioned I've been working on CanJS DevTools. So Chrome extensions allow you to extend the built-in DevTools by adding new panels or adding new sidebars to existing panels. So you can see this pretty picture of our DevTools. The next thing you can do, they let you add new items to the context menu that comes up when you right-click in a web page. This is a pretty popular thing to do. I only use a few Chrome extensions, and as you can see, like 4 or 5 of them all add different items to this menu. The next thing that you do is override some of the built-in pages to Chrome. There's a ton of extensions out there for overriding the new tab page. This one is called Tabby Cat, and it will show you this. It will show you a different pretty cat every time you open a new page. You can also replace the bookmarks manager and like the history page and some other built-in pages if you want to do that. Also, extensions let you overwrite pretty much anything in the page. This is an extension that went viral like a year ago or 2 years ago called Cloud to Butt that basically replaces the word cloud with the word butt on any website. So that's pretty interesting. Cool. So now that you've seen all the cool stuff you can do, let's see how you build one. There's a ton of different scripts that are involved in building Chrome extensions. Each one has different functionality, different ways of communicating with the rest of the extension, and debugging each script requires slightly different techniques. So I'm going to go through all these details. So before we talk about that, let's take a quick aside to talk about this manifest.json file. Every Chrome extension has to have one of these. It basically configures the extension and gives Chrome a bunch of information about what your extension does. Several of the scripts that we're going to talk about are configured through this file. So this one shows basically the minimal example that you need to get a Chrome extension working. You have to have these 3 things, and then all of the configuration I'll show later in the slide. There's a link at the bottom if you want to learn more about it. All right, the first script that we're going to talk about is called a content script. So this one is JSON file, so you basically declaratively put in what you want to load, what file you want to load, and then like what websites you want it to load on, and you can also have it load in like iframes or subframes of the main page if you want to. These can also be injected programmatically. If you're interested in that, you can click this link. I've never done it myself, but it is possible. Cool. So content scripts basically, like it kind of sounds, they let you mess with the content of the page. They share the DOM. They run in the context of the user's page, and they share the DOM. So basically, this means you can access the DOM and you can do whatever you want to it. Like this, if you have this page and this content script runs, you basically will replace the body of the page with bye-bye on every single page you go to. But they share the DOM, but they run in an isolated JavaScript context. So this means they can't read global variables that are created by your page, and they can't set global variables that the page then reads. If you do this kind of thing, you'll basically get undefined all the time. You also can't do something fancy like trying to look up the window through the document and do that. That doesn't work either. Communications. So these share a document within the or with the normal page. That means that they can use events, normal DOM events, to communicate with the page. So you can dispatch an event in your page and listen for it in your content script. And you can do this in either direction. You can dispatch events in the content script also. They can also communicate with the rest of the extension using some Chrome APIs. So basically, Chrome gives you this Chrome runtime API that lets you post messages back to other parts of the extension. We'll see what these are kind of later in the presentation. Also, this can be done in both directions. All right, so debugging content scripts. You can debug these just like you can any other JavaScript file. They're found in the debugger, except they're found in this content scripts tag. So you might have to click this little button to see these scripts. You can also find them with like the commando, control-o, whatever it is to open up a specific file if you know the name of it. All right, that was a lot. Here's a summary. We are going to skip that for time, but if you can come back and read this later on if you want. That's a summary. All right, the next thing is what I'm calling injected scripts. These aren't exactly a feature provided by Chrome extensions, but since content scripts share the DOM with the user's page, they can do things like this. They can basically append new script tags to the body. Chrome gives you this chrome.extension get URL, so you can basically get an absolute path to whatever your injected script file is, and you can inject it, and this will basically, it'll run in the user's page. In order to do this, you have to make sure that you add these as web accessible resources in that manifest file in order to be able to load this file. Cool, so scripts like this share the DOM and they share the same JavaScript context as the page because they're running in the page, they're injected. So you can basically read JavaScript variables and update the DOM, you can do whatever you want. Same thing with communication, they're running in the page, so you can communicate the same way as we saw in the previous one. Between the content script and the injected script, they can use events to pass messages either direction. They can't communicate directly with you can't use any Chrome APIs in the injected script, so they can't communicate directly with the rest of your extension. Debugging, these show up the same way in the debugger, but they are in the normal pages sources. So you'll see under this page tab, you can see this, the extension will show up here and you'll see the injected script there. All right, there's a summary. You can read that on your own time. Cool. The next thing I want to talk about is background scripts. So these basically are scripts that run in the background. They'll run all the time in Chrome as long as any Chrome window is open and listen for events. They listen for events or messages from the page and other parts of your extensions. And then they can perform some actions. So these are also configured through the manifest. See background scripts and then whatever your file is, just like the content script saw before. Cool, so communication, going back to our earlier content script example, this is one of the things that you can communicate to. So your content script can post a message and you can listen for it in your background script and then do whatever you want. Debugging is a little bit different for background scripts like this. You have to actually go to the Chrome extensions page and then you can click this little inspect views button and that will pop up a separate debugger. Since these are running in the background, they're running in a different window. You can't find them through the normal debugger. All right, moving along. All right, the last thing is DevTools page. So DevTools pages are basically used to extend Chrome's DevTools. They're created once per DevTools window. So basically if you set up this configuration, every time there's a DevTools window open, it's going to load this HTML file. And these can be used to create new panels and new sidebars. We'll see what that means. This is another thing that you can communicate to. You can communicate from your content script to your DevTools page or panel or sidebar or whatever, using the same kind of message passing we saw before. All right, you can use these to create panels. You get this Chrome DevTools panels API, and this will create a new, what Chrome calls panel. This is like the top level tabs that you see in DevTools. You can also create sidebars, so you can add new sidebars to the elements panel. So basically the normal elements panel, you can add this new sidebar here, and you can do the same thing with the sources panel. So in the sources tab, you can add a new panel down here. There's, what are these called? Sidebar panes. Cool. Once you have one of these open, a sidebar or a new panel, you can use this inspected window eval function in order to access basically the JavaScript context of the page that you're inspecting. So you can call this eval and you'll be able to read this cool thing that we set up before. All right, to debug these, you can right-click inside of your panel or inside of your sidebar and inspect this. This will run in a separate window, so you'll have this debugger, and then you're inspecting the debugger inside of another debugger. It's very, very cool. Cool, there's a summary. All right, so let's go through a quick example. So we're gonna build a sample extension. Really, it's very simple. It does these 5 things. It's gonna show an icon in the Chrome toolbar. It's going to extend Chrome's DevTools with a new panel. then it's going to update the icon that we created in step 1 whenever the panel is open. It's going to add a JavaScript variable to the user's page and use that to read the DOM and display it in your panel. This is basically like reproducing your own elements panel. Cool, let's get going. I'm going to make these run real fast. All right, so in this page, what we're doing is we're starting with that normal manifest.json, and then we are, oh, this went way too fast. All right, and we're setting up an icon using this browser action. You can see it's going to put this vomiting PNG in there. We're going to load that by going to the extensions page, and then we can see there at the, this one is too short to make double speed. It's very tiny. You can't make this toolbar any bigger, but you can see there's a little guy thrown up here in the icon. Cool. Next step. What we're going to do is create a new DevTools page. Maybe let me try 1.5x. See how that goes. Oh, I broke it. Oh, I really screwed this up. Okay. I'm going to create a DevTools page. We're going to go, this is really annoying. So much better at this yesterday, Jason. All right, so we created a DevTools page by putting it in the manifest. Then we create this index.html file that we're going to use for the page. All this is going to do is load a script tag. In that script tag, we're going to use a Chrome API to create a panel. So like we showed before, we're going to create a new panel for our sample extension, and that's going to load a separate HTML file. So we'll create that. This one is going to be some HTML. So once we have that, we'll go back to the Chrome extensions page, reload, and then open up DevTools, and we can see we've got our sample extension here with our HTML in it. I wish these would freeze at the last step. Cool, so we got our sample extension there. All right, next step, we're going to update the icon that we created at the beginning whenever a user is using our DevTools panel. So we're gonna use this runtime connect in our panel to connect to this background script whenever the DevTools is open. We'll create a background script that's going to listen for that connection and update the icon. So here we've got this background.js. It's going to listen for that connection. And then when something connects, it does this check to make sure it's our extension that is the thing that's connecting. And then it's going to update the icon when that connection happens by setting the icon with this other Chrome API. And then we're also going to do the same thing when the user disconnects. We're going to change the icon back to the original. So now, once we go back and reload the extension, you can see here, you can maybe see this. When the DevTools is open, you get this little guy with glasses. And then when you close the DevTools, it goes back to the original little guy vomiting. Cool. The last step we're going to do is read. This one's a little bit longer, so I'm definitely going to make this faster. I'm going to read the user's page. So we're going to create a content script like we did at the very beginning. This content script, all it's going to do is inject a script tag into the page. Using that same code that I showed at the very beginning. We're going to make that accessible so that it'll actually work. This is going to set up a global variable that we can use from our DevTools panel. So I use some crazy namespace variable so that somebody doesn't accidentally use this. It's going to create this function called getElementTree that's going to get all of the elements from the user's page. So then we're going to update our panel. We're going to add a button that's going to basically load that data, and then a div where we're going to store the tree. So my HTML, I created a button, I created a div. In the JavaScript here, I'm going to grab those, as you can see. So I'm going to listen for somebody to click on that button, and when they do, I'm going to do something. Oh yeah, when they do this, I'm going to call that eval method that's going to load the data from the user's page. And then if we get back, if we actually get back some data, I'm going to call this function, which I haven't written yet, called update container. That's basically going to write that data into the page. There's a lot more code here, which I'm going to skip over. Still some more. Skip ahead to this work. All right, so now when we're using this extension, what just happened is basically click that button, the code we just wrote read all of the HTML from the user's page, and we're displaying it here inside of our extension. It's very tiny, but there it is. Cool. That is it. If you want to see this code so you can actually understand what's going on, there's a link to it here, and there's also a link in the forum post.
Presumably Chrome handled all the security stuff. Is there any like gotchas or anything about security that you ran into or worried about?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a lot of other, so basically all of the options that you pick in that manifest.json get shown up as, you know, whatever those do is what the security that it's going to put in your extensions like download page. I don't know that people really worry about Chrome extension security all that much, but yeah, it definitely will tell you when you're like, if you use a content script, it'll like tell people now that this can access your page data or whatever. So you get little prompts, and it also shows up in the Chrome Web Store based on whatever you put in that manifest.
Cool.
From a maintainability perspective, do you think it's better to inject a script tag like you did, or should you just two-string functions and then pass them to eval?
The reason that I injected a script tag, well, the reason that I'm showing it this way is because this is how basically CanJS DevTools work and how like React's DevTools work, because it exposes that global variable so that the framework can call the functions. So basically, can debug is what's actually calling like our injected functions. So
yeah,
I did.
Another way you could do it is just like write your functions in the Chrome debugger and then just two-string them and then pass them to the thing to be eval.
Just like eval a thing that says window dot whatever equals. Is that what you mean?
Like you could transport functions, right? Like you call the function on your window, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, couldn't you just have the body of that function be eval and then call the resulting function?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could.
Okay.
But we still need to set that on the window so that can debug can call that function.
Oh, so it's not just an arbitrary eval. You can just like eval the function every time, and then put the function in parentheses and then call it with its arguments, like an almost immediately invoked function, and just eval that every time.
You can, but what I'm saying is, so can debug, like the stuff that's running inside CanJS, calls window.canjs devtools dot whatever.
Oh, okay, I get what you're saying.
So CanJS calls register, so we want to have that exposed on the window so that the framework can hook into it.
We'll have more time when we go to the breakout rooms for more follow-up. So thank you, Kevin.